There are 8 U.S. states that border more states than you can count on one hand. The state with the most borders will absolutely blow your mind because it is nowhere near where you would expect. We are talking about states that touch so many others that their geography basically shaped American history, economics, and even how we travel today. Here is what is crazy about U.S. state borders. Most people assume the biggest states touch the most other states. That is not true. Size has almost nothing to do with it. Texas is massive, and it only borders 4 states. Alaska does not border any U.S. states at all. The states with the most borders are the ones that ended up in strategic positions, where geographic features, rivers, and historical decisions created these insane connection points. Let's start with the state that ties for the most borders at 8, Missouri. Missouri being the answer surprises everyone because it's not flashy, it's not huge, and many people forget it exists. Missouri borders Iowa to the north, Illinois to the east, across the Mississippi River, Kentucky and Tennessee to the southeast, Arkansas to the south, Oklahoma to the southwest, Kansas to the west, and Nebraska to the northwest. That's 8 different states. The reason Missouri borders so many states is that it sits in the heart of America, along the Mississippi River. When states were being carved out during westward expansion, Missouri became a natural dividing line. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 made it a critical border between free and slave states, which meant everything around Missouri had to be carefully defined. The state became a geographic hub where north meets south and east meets west. But here is what makes Missouri even more interesting. It is not just about the number of borders. Missouri's position made it strategically crucial during the Civil War. Control Missouri, and you control movement up and down the Mississippi River and access to the Western territories. The state was literally divided, with battles fought all over because of how many other states you could reach from there. Now, Missouri ties for first place with Tennessee, which also borders 8 states. Tennessee's border situation is absolutely wild because of how the state is shaped. Tennessee is a long, skinny state that stretches 440 miles from east to west and averages only about 120 miles north to south. That unusual shape means it touches a lot of states. Tennessee borders Kentucky and Virginia to the north, North Carolina to the east, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi to the south, and Arkansas and Missouri to the west. 8 states. The eastern part of Tennessee is in the Appalachian Mountains, the middle is rolling hills, and the western part sits on the Mississippi River. Tennessee basically cuts across 3 different geographic regions, which is why it touches so many states. And here is something people do not realize. Tennessee's shape was designed this way on purpose. When the state was created, leaders wanted it to have access to both the mountains and the river systems for economic reasons. They needed timber from the east and river trade from the west, so they made the state wide enough to connect both. That decision 200 years ago is why Tennessee borders 8 states today. But guess what? There is a state that borders 7 states, and nobody expects it: Colorado. Yes, Colorado, the big rectangle. How does a rectangle border 7 states? Because it is huge, and it is positioned perfectly. Colorado borders Wyoming to the north, Nebraska to the northeast, Kansas to the east, Oklahoma to the southeast, New Mexico to the south, and Utah and Arizona to the west. Wait, you caught that, right? Oklahoma touches Colorado at just one point. The 4 corners is where Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico all meet at a single spot, and it is the only place in the United States where 4 states touch. Because Colorado stretches far enough east to reach Oklahoma and Kansas, and far enough north to touch Wyoming and Nebraska, it ends up with 7 borders despite being a rectangle. Colorado's border count is basically an accident of geometry. When officials drew state lines in the 1860s and the 1870s, they used lines of latitude and longitude to create neat borders, and Colorado ended up as a large square that happened to touch a number of other states because of where those lines intersected. Kentucky also has 7 borders, and this one makes more sense geographically. It borders Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio to the north, across the Ohio River, West Virginia and Virginia to the east, Tennessee to the south, and Missouri to the west. 7 states. Kentucky's border situation is all about rivers. The Ohio River forms the entire northern border, which is why Kentucky touches so many states up there. Rivers were used as natural boundaries when states were being created, and the Ohio River happened to be this massive dividing line between the North and South. Kentucky's position along that river made it a border state during the Civil War, stuck between Union states to the north and Confederate states to the south. And here is a weird fact. Technically, Kentucky's border extends to the low water mark on the northern side of the Ohio River, which means small parts of Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio are actually on the Kentucky side of the river. There are bizarre pockets where Kentucky owns land north of the river because of how the borders were drawn. It creates legal headaches to this day. Arkansas ties with Kentucky at 7 borders. Arkansas touches Missouri to the north, Tennessee and Mississippi to the east, Louisiana to the south, and Texas and Oklahoma to the west. What makes Arkansas's border count high is that it is positioned right in the middle of the south-central U.S., connecting the Deep South to the southwest. Most of its borders are either rivers or straight lines drawn by surveyors. The Mississippi River forms the eastern border with Tennessee and Mississippi, while the western borders are mostly surveyed lines. Arkansas is like Missouri, not flashy, but its position makes it connect to everything around it. Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Pennsylvania also have high border counts. But here is where things get really interesting. The states with the most borders are not necessarily the most important ones economically today, but they were absolutely crucial during America's expansion and the Civil War. Missouri and Kentucky were border states where the Union and the Confederacy fought for control. Tennessee saw more Civil War battles than any state except Virginia. Colorado was the gateway to Western mining. These states became critical connection points that shaped how the entire country developed. And you know what's wild? The states with the fewest borders are often the biggest. California only borders 3 states. Texas borders 4. New York only borders 5. These massive, economically dominant states have fewer connections because they are either on the coast, large enough that they do not need to stretch to reach resources, or powerful enough to define their own borders. The whole border situation basically comes down to geography, rivers, historical compromises, and the random decisions of surveyors in the 1800s. Missouri and Tennessee ended up with 8 borders, not because they planned it that way, but because they are in the middle of everything, and rivers created natural connection points. Colorado has 7 borders because rectangles can behave oddly when you scale them up, and Kentucky has 7 because the Ohio River snakes around, touching many neighbors. The craziest part? These border counts have real implications today. States with more borders have more interstate commerce, more jurisdictional complexity, and more requirements for cooperation with neighbors. Missouri does not just deal with its own problems. It has to coordinate with 8 other states on everything from environmental issues to law enforcement to highway planning. That is a bureaucratic nightmare. Which state's border situation surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments.